Welcome to the Upside Down Kingdom.
Hey there, welcome to the sermon preview for today. Looking a little bit different. Here with Rich and Lance and Jared. We're out on a round of golf. We were supposed to golf around for the Youth for Christ golf scramble, I don't know, a month ago.
Yep.
And it got rained out, so we're making that up. These are all guys that have been a part of the youth team at some point in the last year or so. So we're gonna golf around and see how it goes and maybe talk about the scripture this week a little bit while we go. All right, so the passage that we're looking at this week is going to be Matthew chapter 7, verse 13 through 20. And this actually starts a new section. If you remember, we have broke up our Sermon on the Mount into 5 different sections, and this starts a new section called Discipled Living. And in this section, we see 4 different examples of Jesus really calling us to action, where we choose to follow his way of life, follow his upside down kingdom, or we choose something else. And so in this first passage that we're going to look at this week, we have 2 different examples of that. One is the narrow road or the broad road, where we choose one of those. And the second is this idea of good fruit and bad fruit. Are we looking at teachers or prophets who are producing good fruit and are good teachers, true teachers, or looking at those that produce bad fruit, which would be considered false teachers or false prophets? So we've got this passage where Jesus is saying, hey, listen, the way that you respond to these words that I'm giving matters. The way that you live matters. The choices that you make matter. And that ultimately leads us down this narrow road or this broad road, or produces good fruit or bad fruit. So let's go check with Lance and Jared and Rich a little bit and ask them a couple questions and get their opinion on this passage. All right, Rich, so as we're looking at this passage, a question that I might have for you is, what is the difference between a broad road and a narrow road that we see that Jesus uses this example in this passage?
I think of a broad road that's well traveled, and the narrow road is maybe less traveled.
Yeah, right. So we even see this on a golf course, right? I mean, we have traveled some of the narrow roads to find some of the balls that have maybe not gone where we want them to go. And the narrow roads are usually bumpier and harder to navigate maybe. And I think, as we relate that to our spiritual life, we see that when we take the narrow road in following the way of Jesus, it's not the easy way. It brings about some hardships potentially as we face what that means, what it means to be a disciple of Jesus in that way.
Yes.
All right, Jared, so I just talked to Rich, and we talked about the difference between a broad road and a narrow road, and how the narrow road is a little bit more difficult. And Jesus uses that example to tell us that being his disciple is not smooth sailing all the time.
Sure.
So what is it about being a disciple, or why is being a disciple so difficult, or why can it be difficult in this world?
Yeah, and I think the title of the sermon series, Upside Down Kingdom, really sums up why it's difficult to be a disciple. It's truly backwards thinking from what our human nature is. Our desires, what we want for this world, compared to what it means to truly be a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so Lance, I've talked to Rich and Jared about maybe the difference between the narrow road and the broad road, but this passage goes a little bit further and talks about good fruit versus bad fruit, and Jesus says you will recognize them by their fruit. So how do we recognize good fruit, or how do we recognize bad fruit? How do we go about doing that?
I think you kind of look at their actions to start off. I mean, obviously that's surface level. You don't know the intentions of their heart, obviously. But looking at people's actions and reflecting on what they're doing, what they're saying, you can kind of judge someone by how they're acting. It's going to give you a little bit of a determine how their fruit is.
Sure, yeah. So there's a lot of discernment that happens within that. I think there's within that judgment, it goes back to our passage that we've talked about on judgment, where we have to make sure we're judging ourselves first.
Yep.
And then we also have to make sure that it's being tested to Scripture. Is what they're saying and what they're doing, does it align with Scripture? So kind of that theological or Scripture test, we would want to do that to recognize, does it align with Scripture? Is it good fruit, or does it not? Is it bad fruit in that way? So, I'm really excited for this passage. I think we'll be able to dig deep and see what is this response that Jesus is asking us to do in relation to what he's told us in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. How are we supposed to respond in that? So looking forward to entering into this sermon. We're getting close to the end of our Sermon on the Mount series. We're going to finish well, the best that we can in this, and go from there. So look forward to see you Sunday.
See you guys.
In his upside down kingdom, the king laid down his crown for the cross. He chose to give his life for the lost and the broken souls. He's coming to take us home.